Shabbat Shalom, this is Rabbi Klein from the Greater Miami Jewish Federation. The following reflection is in memory of those souls lost in the Surfside disaster a little bit more than a year ago. Our Haftarah this week opens up with the following words. Nachamu, Nachamu, console, console my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and declare to her that the term of service is over, that her iniquity is expiated, for she has received at the hand of God double for all her sins. A voice calls in the desert, clear the way for God. Straighten out in the wilderness a highway for God. This Shabbat, the first of the 7 Shabbats of consolation following the national mourning of Tisha B'Av, is aptly named Shabbat Nachamu, the opening words of the Haftarah. Isaiah's words are meant to serve as a balm of sorts, following a time of devastating loss and destruction. Yes, Jerusalem has indeed paid for its iniquities and injustices, but this time has passed, and the redemption is near. God is not far. In fact, a heavenly voice calls to clear the road to Jerusalem through the lifeless wilderness as God again will approach. Jerusalem will not forever be abandoned, forlorn, alone. In our own lives, we have seen this prophecy fulfilled. Like the metaphorical Jerusalem, the crying of the Jewish people as well will also end. The exiles and suffering that we as a people have experienced will end. Isaiah is not only speaking to exiles of long ago, but to each of us. Look forward, Isaiah says, in expectation. How can one say these things? Only days earlier, we read the words of another prophet. In the book of Lamentations, Jeremiah mourns the destruction of the temple with an intensity unrivaled in almost any other text. His eyes become dried from crying, as there are simply not enough tears. He says, "For these things do I weep. My eyes flow with tears. Far from me is any comforter. Who might revive my spirit? My children are forlorn, for the foe has prevailed." If only his eyes were an endless well of tears, the tears would never cease. What is Isaiah talking about? What hope? What consolations? What comfort? There are distinct types of loss in life. The destruction of Jerusalem is not a type of loss that one gets over or overcomes, much less achieves closure, a term that should never be used in any significant loss. Yet, in only days, we have moved from a place of endless mourning and crying to a hopeful charge to create a highway forward for our God. Never have two prophets been so diametrically opposed. How does a nation move from a place of despair and degradation to a place of consolation and even hope? In our own lives, how do we do that? In the opening words of this week's Parashat, God provides the key. You'll remember that God punished Moses that he would not go into the land of Israel. When the people were thirsty in the wilderness, he had struck the rock rather than speaking to it as God has commanded. Rather than leading the people into the land, he is now commanded to ascend the mountain, see the land that was promised to the patriarchs, and die on that mountain. Now imagine the bitterness, the pain, the sorrow that Moses felt upon hearing this decree. An entire life devoted to bringing the people to a land he will never set foot on. What a bitter pill to swallow. Yet Moses sees a moment of grace and asks God at the beginning of this week's Parsha to reconsider. Moses turns to God. I pleaded with God at that moment. Let me enter the land, he said. Relent upon your decree. The Midrash elaborates that this was not a simple request of Moses to rescind the decree. It was a full court press. In one Midrashic tradition, drawing on the numeric value of VaEtchanan, I pleaded, Moses approached God 515 times. God's response to Moses' entreaties is denied absolutely and decidedly. God said to me, "Enough, Ravlach, speak no more to me of this matter." God's response is laconic, unfeeling, even insensitive. The words leave Moses with no hope, No ambiguity, no counter argument. On the contrary, Moses will go up to Mount Moab, he will charge Joshua with leadership, and there he will die in an unknown grave in the wilderness. Why is God so insensitive to Moses, even cruel? There's a message for us in God's absolute answer to Moses. Life affords us many avenues and possibilities. Life has many doors through which we may pass. Yet, there are some doors in this world that become locked and no longer accessible. No matter how much we pray and petition, these prayers remain unanswered. This teaching of life is bitter, but critical in the capacity to move forward. To continue to bang on locked doors is not only a basis exercise in futility, but prevents us engaging in real acts of utility. Moses indeed was going to die, but God was telling him directly that this life is not over. It is true that he would not lead the people to the next stage of Jewish history, but he was needed now to shape the leadership and the people to embrace their next stage. Moses had to strengthen and elevate Joshua's profile among the people, give them moral and religious instruction, and prepare them for a critical time in which he would not be present. Once Moses had entreated with all his heart, but was ultimately denied, Moses was given the gift of perception and possibility once again. To move to this place of acceptance may take time, but once one has moved through the pain of loss, one can begin to embrace what is and what could be, while still recognizing and remembering those things in life which can never be. As long as Moses is pleading with God, he is unable to embrace the present and certainly cannot move the people towards the future. What is true on the personal level with Moses is also true on the national level. Tisha B'Av, it's a moment of Rav Lachem, a moment of speak to me no more about this matter. On the day of Tisha B'Av, the Jewish people remember a time that indeed everything was lost and everything that we knew is no longer. The day of Tisha B'Av is a day which we cannot and will not accept what has happened. We cry and let out our feelings, whatever those feelings may be, like Jeremiah. The liturgical dirges recited on Tisha B'Av, the keynote, are not simply reflections on a distant past, but these poems are the voices of generations upon generations that use the seminal event of the destruction of the temple to reflect upon their present as well. Yet the acceptance of this disaster provides a new space in which possibilities are possible. We can mourn and remember what is lost, but we can build the foundations for the future as well. Our Jewish tradition teaches us that it is dangerous to mourn for too long. Our national day of mourning is followed by a Shabbat of consolation, a Shabbat Nachamu. In fact, this is the first of 7 Shabbats, the Shiva de Nechemta, which culminates in Rosh Hashanah, a day of personal and national renewal. This movement from mourning to the ability to be consoled is reflective of a resilient individual, and it's also reflective of a resilient community. Contained in these days is the realization that devastation, crying, and sorrow is woven into the fabric of existence. And yet at the same time, our prophets and rabbis call out to us, promising us that there will be an end to the suffering, even a time of renewal and even joy. Perhaps we are not in a place in our lives when we are ready to hear these words, and perhaps we are. Either way, we plant the seeds of faith and hope in our hearts this Shabbat with the conviction that again we will experience joy. Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami. Be comforted, my people. May each of you feel these words as well when you need them most. Shabbat Shalom.